Index fund investing used to be simple. Buy the market, hold it for the long term, sleep well at night, and retire with your financial goals met. That's the kind of accepted blueprint to long-term investing, or at least that's what's been written in this timeless classic, which I first read about 6 years ago. But now index fund investing is starting to look a little bit more like a roller coaster rather than a retirement plan. What started as a strategy of broad market diversification has kind of taken a bit of a hard turn. Instead of investing in hundreds of different stocks, now some ETFs are betting on one single stock, or one single economic niche, or even one single idea. Back in 1998, the median index fund held over 500 different stocks. Fast forward to 2025, and that number's dropped to just 123. Much less diversification and much more concentration risk. And it's not just that it's fewer stocks, it's that actually fund managers are adding substantially more risk to these funds. Today we have over 100 leveraged single stock ETFs, which control over $23 billion in assets, with average daily trading volume being about $9 billion a day. And it's potentially exposing perhaps newer investors to risks that they perhaps don't even realise. And with investors piling into ETFs at a record pace, I thought we could chat a little bit more about some of the problems that this potentially presents with index fund investing. This video is also sponsored by Yesoul, but more on them a little bit later on in the video. This chart is probably the reason that many of you guys invest, myself included. It's a chart of the S&P 500, a market tracking index comprised of the top 500 companies in the United States of America. And over time, it's performed pretty well for investors. But it wasn't until 1976 where investing into the S&P 500 became a little bit more accessible, where John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, launched the first indexed investment trust, more formally known as the Vanguard 500 Index Fund. The aim was to offer lower cost and broad market diversification to investors for the very first time. By 1977, they were able to bypass the traditional broker-dealer network to eliminate sales charges on purchases of Vanguard funds. And by 1983, Vanguard launched their own low-commission brokerage services to offer up to 70% savings on stock trading commissions. This was a revolution because it massively reduced expense ratios, as you can see from this chart on screen, which shows that Vanguard have been able to reduce those fees by nearly 87% between 1975 and 2021, versus the industry weighted averages, which have only declined by 33% in the same time period. Now, despite Vanguard making some questionable decisions lately, let's say, around their brokerage service and increased fees, their products and their product fees, in my opinion anyway, still capture what index fund investing is all about. But in a more popular and competitive world of index fund investing, it's slowly changing to a battle of assets under management, which is probably not for the better. The ETF market is a $16 trillion industry, and with that, ETF issuers have looked to bring innovative solutions and exciting ETFs to the market for their investors. And they do this for one of two reasons. The first, of course, is to make money from the fees, but secondly, they're also obviously looking to put together good funds that their investors can invest into, because essentially they're pinning their reputation on the long-term performance of those funds. So whilst there are many broad market index funds, which are arguably the most popular based on this data that I found from MarketWatch, there is this newer wave of ETFs now that are highly concentrated, some of them are leveraged, and some of them track very niche sectors which have hugely amplified risks associated with them. Yet despite this, it's a vastly growing market which is exciting investors and attracting billions of dollars worth of investment value. Leveraged products being one of them, so let's talk a little bit about how they work. A leveraged ETF takes a benchmark that it tracks and it delivers a multiple of the daily performance of that benchmark. Now, you can have long versions of a leveraged ETF where investors are expecting price to go up, but you can also have short versions of the ETFs, also known as inverse leveraged ETFs, which is where investors are expecting price to go down. The benchmark then has an associated multiplier, which you can see from this scale, where a minus leverage is for a short position and a positive leverage is for a long position. Now, you might be thinking, well, based on that S&P 500 chart that you showed us earlier in the video, then surely it stands to good reason why somebody would want a leveraged S&P 500 ETF in order to benefit from those amplified returns. But this is where it's important to note that leveraged ETFs have a negative return bias, because they reset their returns daily. It means that in a hypothetical scenario, let's say that we invested £1,000 into a standard S&P 500 ETF and then another £1,000 into a 2x leveraged S&P 500 ETF. And then let's say that the stock market goes on a string of poor performance and say the market declines 3% per day for 3 consecutive days. Because of compounding, the single unit ETF would be down 8.7%, making the value of the investment £913, whilst the 2x leveraged ETF would be down 16.9% to £831. You might be thinking, well, a leveraged position will surely just bounce back twice as quickly, but this is where the math doesn't quite math as you'd probably expect. To recover an 8.7% loss from a non-leveraged product, you would need a gain of 9.5%. But to recover from those losses of 16.9% on a 2x leveraged product, you would need returns of 20.3%. So you'd need more than double the returns from a leveraged product over a non-leveraged product just to get back to break even, which is where the math kind of works a little bit against you and is a risk factor that should certainly be considered, especially when you consider that the market has historically dropped between 40 and 50%. If an investor invests at the wrong time, it could be quite catastrophic. But it doesn't quite stop there, because this is where the world of leveraged products can get even more risky. There are some fund providers, or also known as exchange-traded products, that offer highly concentrated single stock leveraged ETPs. Looking at this leveraged Tesla ETP, you can see how volatile and quite frankly how poorly these can perform. Now, yes, of course, I've cherry-picked this one in order to highlight the risks, but now let's take a look at some data of non-leveraged individual stock picks in order to provide a little bit more perspective. Morgan Stanley recently conducted some research which concludes from a sample of 6,500 stocks from 1984 to 2024, the median drawdown was 85.4%, with it taking 2.5 years to get back to par. What I'm trying to highlight here is that single stock investing can be a high risk and highly volatile investment strategy, let alone when you've added 2 or 3x leverage to it. Now, that's not to say that individual stock pickers can't perform phenomenally well. Warren Buffett is a great example, and he's one of the richest blokes on the planet, and it's simply all he's ever done. But your leverage products, which the likes of Warren Buffett have steered well clear from, certainly instill a little bit more speculative investor behavior and perhaps don't instill proper long-term investment principles. It's possibly the reason why the FCA have launched a review into these more complex exchange-traded products because of the risks involved, which hopefully I'm trying to highlight throughout this video. Now, in relation to these complex products, FT writer Robin Wigglesworth, which is a great name by the way, wrote, "Leveraged single-name ETFs incinerate investor money, make markets more volatile, and are solely created to generate fees for the sponsor." So with that in mind, what's the point in them and what are they actually used for? When I think about investing, I'm thinking about low cost, long-term, broad market diversification, regularly investing in order to kind of steadily grow my wealth over time. It's a relatively conservative approach in my opinion, and it's just the way that I like to think about things. But there are different investor archetypes, if you like, that capture different types of investors. There was this paper that I found that was written from Standard Chartered, who surveyed 1,200 investors and they assessed them against 9 different personality traits. And they concluded that there are 3 different types of investor. You've got the comfortable investor, the conservative investor, and the enthusiastic investor. Now, you can probably see where I'm heading with this, but the enthusiastic investor is one that loves a little bit more speculation, is a little bit more impulsive, which is possibly the personality type that best suits these kinds of leveraged products. But it could also be equally enticing to the conservative or the comfortable investor, with the potential to create amplified returns without those investors perhaps assessing the risks associated with them. But these types of products are not for the long-term investor. They've not been designed in a way that looks for you to hold them for 20 or 30 years. So let's take a listen to a Bloomberg clip which actually inspired this video when I was watching Bloomberg earlier on this week from somebody called Sylvia Jablonski, who is the CEO of Defiance ETFs, who shares exactly what these leveraged ETFs are all about and what they're for.
Yeah, so I think if you look at just generally single name levered ETFs and levered ETFs in general, if you have a levered ETF on a sector that is just absolutely non-volatile and you're leveraging it up, some investors may review that position every day, understand that there's a daily risk, but they may hold it for a little bit longer because the volatility is not as, kind of erosive as a product that is highly volatile. And so we see traders embracing this in the correct way, right? They're day trading these products. They're looking at them in the short term. They're looking for amplified exposure for a period of time, whether it's around earnings or for some sort of, news bit, or they think that volatility and direction will play in their favor. They put on the position, they monitor it, and, they kind of understand that this isn't a set it and forget it in your portfolio at this stage.
So these funds are for short-term tactical traders who are looking to capitalize on news reports, earning reports, any kind of short-term change in the macroeconomic environment or economic policy where a trader can capitalize on the short-term fluctuations within the market. And I found a key investor document for one of these leveraged ETFs, and it very clearly states that the fund is intended for investors who wish to take a very short-term view on the underlying index and whose investments are not intended as buy and hold investments. So these types of products are very much for the strategic investor and not for the passive investor. But that's not the only ETF that I wanted to share with you guys today that I think investors should proceed with caution with. But before we do that, today I wanted to talk to you about today's video sponsor, which is Yesoul. Now I know, fitness gear in a finance video, but hear me out. I needed something to offset the time I spend sat at my desk doing hours and hours of research for these videos. And the G1M Plus made working out much more enjoyable. I can rotate the 21-inch screen to set it to my desired place, hook up my iPhone to activate the screen mirroring feature, and I've actually been connecting it to Zwift, which I've wanted to do now for quite a long time. I've started off with some training sessions, but a few race events are certainly on the cards. But if you're a little less competitive, you can simply just pedal away and watch YouTube or Netflix. And look, it's also way cheaper than some of the other big brand bike names that you might be more familiar with, yet they have all of the same features in the Yesoul app, where you can do workout classes and other training sessions, which means less money spent is money saved, and I'm certainly all for that. Now, on the topic of saving money, Yesoul have also kindly given me a £100 discount code to all of my subscribers, which I'll put up on screen now, where you can click on the link down in the description below if you're interested in picking up your own home fitness bike. And with that said, let's get back to talking about ETFs. Thematic ETFs concentrate on particular industries, trends, or themes. And ETF issuers launched these exchange-traded funds to the market in order to capitalize on macro trends, along with bigger themes that are going on within the broader economy, within the world, in order to attract additional investor capital, in order to boost their assets under management figure. And of course, to collect a little bit more in fees too. Now, as a strategic product, I like these and I can certainly see the use case for them. But I would argue they're certainly more for the active investor who has their finger on the pulse of the stock market rather than the passive investor like myself who simply wants to sit back, buy their investments every single month and kind of set it and forget it. But here's why I think thematic ETFs need to be used with an element of caution. Firstly, they can be more volatile. They have high concentration risk. Some get hyped up and then crash. Long-term performance is generally poor, and fees can be more expensive too. Let's address some of these points with some data which I found from Morningstar, which I think is pretty eye-opening. This chart highlights thematic ETFs and whether they've underperformed or outperformed global equities, or whether the fund has been closed altogether. And what I think is clear to see is that as time goes on, more and more of these funds fail. 60% in fact get closed after 15 years, with another 31% underperforming global equities, and a tiny fraction of just 9% of funds outperforming over a 15-year period. That's a very small percentage of successful funds, which kind of clearly show that the odds are quite stacked against investors when it comes to long-term successful performance. This is why I've kind of concluded that these thematic ETFs are very much for the strategic active investor and certainly aren't for the passive investor that's looking to build wealth for retirement. And with these thematic ETFs, the fees are also pretty high too. If we look at a slightly earlier report from 2024 from Morningstar, it compares the fees of thematic funds versus non-thematic. And generally you can see that the thematic funds in red are far more expensive. So they cost investors like 4 or 5 times more, yet 91% of those funds either underperform or are closed within a 15-year period. For me, the math doesn't math when it comes to looking at these types of funds as a long-term wealth builder. And based on the research that I've done from this video, I've kind of concluded the following considerations. Number one, not all investment products are right for every investor. It's important to understand the type of investor you are and align your investments to your risk appetite and investment objectives. Secondly, don't assume all ETFs are diversified safely and are sound long-term investments, because not all of them are. Thirdly, study the prospectus and understand the underlying methodology behind any investment that you're making. Always do your own research. Now, whilst you're over here, YouTube thinks you might be interested in this video next, so be sure to click on that now. With that being said, I'll see you over in the next one.